Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Sunday night in the U.S., and we are getting ready to move into the early morning hours over Ireland, where we are going to see Ophelia making its transition now over into an extratropical cyclone, albeit a powerful one, that'll be moving into southwestern Ireland Monday morning. Right around or just before midday, and then northeastward from there, just inland of the west coast of Ireland, and then eventually moving up offshore over Scotland, and then out northeastward from there, weakening, of course, once it moves across Ireland, but it will be coming in at its strongest intensity when it comes in to the southwest coast. We are going to start to see weather conditions that deteriorate across all of the British Isles, but there will be a wide variety of weather that's going to occur, from some areas getting very little rain and some wind, to some areas getting some rain and a lot of wind, and then some areas that are going to get wind and rain. But the strongest winds are going to be near and east of the track of the storm. The heaviest rains will be along and north and west of the track. So I'll show you now on the weather video. We'll look at the satellites, the latest models in what they're forecasting, and then we'll come back and we will take whatever questions you have. So just stand by. Welcome once again to everyone watching from Ireland, England, Wales, Scotland, and of course here in my home in the U.S. as we watch Hurricane Ophelia, which is gradually losing its tropical characteristics. If you look at here on the satellite view, you can still pick out that there's a core in the circulation, that bright white blotch that you see. I'm going to stop the last frame here and highlight it for you. So it's right in here. There's still a bit of a core circulation, but you'll notice that the cloud structure on the satellite is taking on that comma shape, which is much more of what you see with non-tropical systems. But I want to emphasize that whether it's tropical or non-tropical, this is going to be a powerful cyclone as it moves northeastward and heads for the southwest coast of Ireland on Monday morning, Ireland time. And when we look at it on the full satellite view of Europe, you can see that it's kind of merged with this frontal zone that's right along just offshore. I'll highlight it here for you. It's right embedded right in there. You can still pick out the higher and colder cloud tops. So that last frame there is from a little bit earlier. See if I can catch that the very last frame and stop it for you. Hang on here. And there we go. Okay, so here it is now. The cloud tops are just to the south of the south shore of Ireland, but the heavy weather with this, whoops, one more time. There we go. The heavy weather with this is still down in this area here. And this is going to start moving in during the early morning hours as we continue to see the track off to the northeast. Quite a formidable storm that we're dealing with here. Also, you can see the energy that's out in the central Atlantic. That's the trough that's swinging up and around and lifting Ophelia on northeastward. So you're going to look for weather conditions to deteriorate rapidly during the early morning hours across Ireland, and the height of this will be from 6 a.m. till noon Dublin time before weather conditions begin to improve. Should also point out that because of the rapid speed of movement, this thing is racing northeastward at between 35 and 40 miles an hour. That is going to impact the winds. While the sustained winds may be running at about 40 or 50 knots, especially right along or just off the coast, we are going to have wind gusts in excess of hurricane force, especially in the mountainous areas in Ireland. The wind could actually be 20 to 30% higher in the mountain areas than it would, and in the elevated areas, than it will be along the immediate coast. The weather model, I'm going to just show you the GFS. All the models were about the same here. The system actually gets a little bit of juice from that upper trough that I showed you that's swinging around. There's a bit of a jet streak in the upper layers of the atmosphere that is coming into play, and you can see it right here in the yellow. There's where the surface low is when it's off the Irish coast, and this jet streak in the high layers of the atmosphere gets involved, and that gives it kind of a little bit of extra juice in the way a winter storm would get it. Now, once again, with respect to rainfall, it's going to be along and west and north of the track, so it would be western and northern Ireland and northern areas of Scotland that will get some heavy rains. You'll notice that not that much rain falls, if any at all, in England. This is for most of England. This is going to be more of a bit of more of a wind event, but certainly not from the standpoint of the kind of winds that we're going to see in Ireland. I'm going to pull up a sounding so we can actually take a look at some of the winds that the model at least is forecasting. You see how all these isobars here, these are lines of equal pressure. When you have a large change in pressure over a relatively short distance, that is a definition of the strength of the wind. So here we have a very, very tight pressure gradient around that low. So that's going to be producing some strong winds. I'm going to try and pull up a sounding. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And apparently right now it's decided not to work for me. Okay, so for some reason I can't get the sounding up, but I can at least pull up the 10-meter wind map, and there's that purple area. This is at noon on Monday, Dublin time, and the purple is 50 knots or greater, touching the south and southwest coast of Ireland. You can see where the low center is, just right along that southwest corner. You've got gales, 40-knot plus winds in the Irish Sea back to the west coast of England, and those gales spread northward, north of Ireland toward coastal Scotland as the low center moves over northern Scotland, and then eventually out northeastward as the low deteriorates. So once it moves inland over Ireland, it is going to weaken somewhat and continue to weaken as it moves its way northeastward, eventually into Norway and getting absorbed in another storm that's up in the North Atlantic. So there really hasn't been that much change in terms of what the models have been showing here. We are at this point now just going to wait for weather conditions to deteriorate. I was looking at some of the hourly observations over Ireland this evening around as we approached the midnight hour. There wasn't anything especially startling. Most of the winds were on the light side. They're starting to pick up a little bit right along the immediate coast, but you will see the wind conditions deteriorate. Those winds will be picking up overnight and then getting very strong during Monday. So just hang in there for 1 second, and we'll come back and just chat for a few minutes, and I'll take whatever questions you have. And here I am. Make sure I shut the audio off. Okay, so as Ed finds, he said, does the Gulf Stream add any juice to the system like this? The Gulf Stream, not so much, but the fact that we have this very strong jet streak in the upper layers of the atmosphere, part of that upper trough that's swinging around and lifting it up, is going to give it a little bit of juice as it approaches the coastline. That's why we see the pressure in the system actually drop tomorrow before it makes landfall, and then it starts to rise as it moves inland and begins to slowly weaken. The other thing I want to point out, again, for areas that I'm sorry, I'm trying to get everybody's geography in here, so this includes Northern Ireland, obviously. It includes Wales. Elevated areas. The gales will be spreading up the Irish Sea along the west coast of England and Wales. So you will see some strong winds there, particularly, again, in elevated areas. The winds at the higher atmosphere are stronger. They can be every bit of 30 to 50% higher than what you might experience at ground level. So it's certainly possible that you could see gusts to or in excess of hurricane force in some places. So just bear that in mind. Even if you're not in a coastal area, if you are in an elevated area, you're going to run the risk of some very strong winds. You probably see that happen during winter type storms. And also, by the way, this is all very new to me, okay? We don't really pay that close attention to weather going on in Europe unless there's something extreme happening. And the fact that we really don't have tropical systems that impact this part of the world very often leads us to only have a handful of examples, and certainly doesn't really lend to a good forecasting experience from my end. I like to, having seen many storms in my professional career that I have dealt with, you kind of develop a library in your brain. Well, there's not that much to look at here. There are some examples of it, but because they only happen every 10 years or so, you have to go back really to Hurricane Debbie in 1961 that did considerable damage to Ireland. And I was barely but 2 years old at the time. I was doing a little reading on it, and I saw the track. The track is actually a little bit further to the west with Debbie than it is with this system. And there was apparently a lot of debate with regards to that, whether Debbie had maintained tropical characteristics for a longer period of time. This one is still holding on to its core, but it looks like it's making that transition over into a powerful extratropical cyclone. So I'm going to really be with you on this in the sense of trying to see what's going to happen. We'll find out soon enough as the weather conditions deteriorate overnight. So again, with the track coming into southwestern Ireland and then moving to northwestern Ireland, the strongest winds should be along that track and just to the east. The heavier rains will be along that track and just to the west and also to the north. When you start getting into some of the heavier rains that'll get in to Scotland, for example. And I didn't pull it up in the video, but I will just verbally just take a look at the rainfall amounts. And the models have been very consistent. 15 millimeter rainfalls or more throughout much of western Ireland, as we said, along and north and west of the track. When we go east, we're talking about 15 millimeters or less. There are also some amounts being generated in the 40 to 50 millimeter amounts, but those are very, very small areas right along the immediate northwest coast. And also over Scotland, we do see some amounts of 40 millimeters or higher. But throughout much of England, the rainfall is under 12 millimeters, and in many cases even in the southern part of England, it's mainly under 6 millimeters. So rain is not going to be a huge problem here, except in those areas that I defined. So the wind, I think, is going to wind up being the bigger issue overall. But it's going to be a great learning experience for me because this is all new to me, folks. Is it true MCMC superstorm come right after Ophelia to Ireland? Now, there is another low that models are showing, and I'm going to see what it did today. There is another storm system that's coming in on Thursday. That looks like the bulk of that winds up going to your south into France and southern and into England with some rain. And there is a gale center that's being indicated for Friday coming into Ireland. Actually goes along the southwest coast and to the Irish Sea and cuts England pretty much right in half. And that actually is shown to be a fairly intense storm that is forecast to move through at the end of the week. But why don't we deal with these things one at a time? Maybe I'll be able to do some more special videos regarding the weather up in the British Isles. I'm having actually professionally, I'm having a lot of fun with this. And as Anthony Orr just posted on his message, he's correct. All evidence points to Ophelia being post-tropical. I'm thinking the Hurricane Center will probably wash its hands of this at 11 o'clock Eastern time tonight when it puts out the next advisory. It may very well be the last advisory on Ophelia as it makes that transition over into a post-tropical storm. So I'll be with you in the morning. I hope you're able to come on and let me know exactly what kind of weather you're having, because I'm going to be very curious to see how this all plays out. Hopefully, it turns out to be much less than models are showing. We don't want bad things to happen. So as you can see, I'm not really somebody that goes off the deep end over this sort of stuff. I try to maintain a very calm demeanor through all of this. So let's hope that everything turns out okay, that the storm, for whatever reason, maybe winds up being less of an impact than being indicated. That is a good thing, not a bad thing, okay? Because no responsible meteorologist would be rooting for bad things to happen. In the meantime, in the U.S., the weather remains relatively calm. There really isn't too much happening. We have a cold front that's coming through the east tonight, some thunderstorms and actually some severe weather, as Raymond, who's on here, also pointed out through upstate New York, that there was quite a bit of severe thunderstorm activity going on tonight with the cold front moving through, and that extends down into west central Pennsylvania. Most of those cells should weaken as they move eastward. And then finally, a shot of cool autumn air. They put up the first frost advisories up for areas north and west of the coast of New York City and north of Philadelphia in northwest New Jersey. And this is going to be the coolest shot of the season so far, but that isn't saying much since we haven't had any cool shots in the last month. It's just basically been warm, warm, warm. So we'll see you in the morning, and be safe, everyone. Hopefully it turns out to be much less than expected, much less than forecast. That'll be a good thing. And we'll be on tomorrow morning. And again, I hope you guys can just jump on and let me know what's happening in your neck of the woods.